in the course of this research that I did, I ran across a study, and the study said that a mayor is generally the smartest or the best person that a community has to offer. And I thought, well, that's pretty darn good. I'm going to be sharing as the smartest person in this community. And I kept reading a little bit farther into the study, which you should always do when you're reading studies. And it said, unfortunately, there is an exception to the rule. The smaller the town, the dumber the mayor. Because you're drawing from such a shallow pool. So, take what I've got to say with a grain of salt, if you will. But I did go to Culver, and I have your degree. All right. So for leadership characteristics, I just want to highlight 3 points. Consensus building, empathy, and risk-taking. And I think those are 3 pillars that are very important to somebody who's in a leadership position. So when you talk about consensus building, that is kind of gathering what people think about a certain decision that must be made, a certain type of issue that you're facing. Get those people together and find out what they believe is the way to tackle the project. And that's very important to have that kind of consensus. I gather consensus as the mayor by having weekly staff meetings. So I have my police chief, my public works director, and our city clerk. We all come together, we meet in my office, and we discuss issues that are facing the community, issues that are facing us in the past week, and things that we might be looking forward to in the next week. And everybody's got an equal voice. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about a water line, a sewer line, we're talking about buying a new police vehicle. Everybody has input. And I can tell you they all share freely their opinions, even when I don't necessarily want to hear them, but they do share them. And everybody brings something unique to the table. So the police chief, he deals with citizens on a regular basis. So he's looking at things maybe from a humanities perspective and how to deal with people, a little bit of psychology. The city clerk might look at something from a bookkeeping standpoint as far as, do we have the money for a given project? Can we afford to buy this or replace that? And the public works director is going to look at it from a nuts and bolts perspective. But each of them offers something unique to bring to the table. Once you have that consensus built, then you have what I call buy-in. And it's a lot easier for a leader to go and institute their vision if people have buy-in. You can be a dictator as a leader. You probably won't last very long. You need people to buy into what you're going to say. Then they're more apt to go out, support your decision that you ultimately have to make as the leader, and help you implement it if they feel they had something to do with it. So that's kind of what you want to talk about with consensus building. Empathy. Empathy, I'm sorry, I think my follow-up, they said something about empathy. I hope I'm not stealing anything. But with empathy, I think it's important to think about other people and think about why they think the things they do, how they came up with the opinions that they have, what experiences in their life have led them to a certain point to believe something or to have a certain opinion. And I think we're missing that a lot in our national discussions and even at our state level. We're not talking enough about how these things impact other people, how immigration impacts people, how healthcare impacts people. We've got to start talking. We have to start thinking about others. When you think about others, you're going to be a much more effective leader. If you can only consider yourself, your decisions are going to be short-sighted, they're going to be ill-conceived, and they probably aren't going to work out for you. So empathy is a big part of that. There's an example I ran across, a gentleman named C.P. Ellis. He was a KKK member, and he was actually working with a program called Save Our Schools, and he was paired up with a woman named Ann Atwater. And they came at it from different points of view, obviously. Ann Atwater was an African-American woman who believed that schools should be integrated. Mr. Ellis wanted to make sure that the white voice was heard, and so he went to these meetings. And at the end of a several-day session, he said, I realized Miss Atwater came from the same type of circumstances that I did. We both faced adversity in our youthful lives. We both had things happen to us that caused us to believe what we're at now. But we have a lot more in common than we have that separates us. And at the end of the Save Our Schools session, he stood up, gave a speech, and tore up his KKK card. And to follow out for the rest of their lives, they worked together for civil rights. And I think that's an idea of empathy, bringing something to the table, considering other people, and then making a well-informed decision based on other people's points of view. Risk-taking. That's inherent in being a leader. I take a risk every time I make a decision. When we consider ordinances in the community and how we want to tackle a certain problem, ultimately the decision, a good fair amount of the time, comes down to the decision I make and is me having to make that difficult decision. And so you have to be able to be ready to take a risk. If you don't take risks, you're not going to fare very well. You will fail. You will fail a lot. And as much as you think the tuition of Culver is expensive, the School of Hard Knocks tuition is much more expensive. And in my 21 years of owning a restaurant, I paid the tuition very high. And I've made mistakes. But it's learning from those mistakes, not being afraid to take the risks, and then going back and say, all right, I made a mistake. What can I do? How can I look at that mistake and learn something from it? If you never gain anything and never learn anything from your mistakes, you've missed the whole point. So risk-taking is something that is very important. As an example, we recently introduced a business license concept to the community, and those of you who come from a larger city are thinking, you're just now doing a business license. Yes. We're kind of a fiercely independent group here in town and don't like a lot of regulation. So introducing this was a bit of a challenge, and I have been told that it couldn't be done because somebody in 1965 said we would never do a business license. Well, I wasn't alive in 1965, and I didn't make that promise. But the business license had a component that is unique, and it was a risk. What it required was insurance on your property, just as you must have liability insurance on your car. We wanted to have insurance on people's property because when buildings would collapse or they would catch on fire, then the taxpayer is stuck having to clean that up. So we took a risk. We formulated an ordinance with a business license requiring insurance, requiring that your taxes be paid. And we've gotten some pushback from that, but we tried to think through how it would be, how it would work for people. So the empathy component, how would it affect you? How much would the premiums be? How would we roll that out? Building consensus. So I have to work with my board of aldermen. I meet a lot of people on a day-to-day basis in the restaurant, talking to them, getting their opinions. So consensus building. And all those things tied together, we rolled out the business license. I haven't been shot or crucified yet, but it's been interesting, and we've made some mistakes on it, and we will learn from those mistakes. To wrap up, I just want to tell you, whatever you do, we have a shortage of leadership in this country right now, and you guys are the next group, and you can't shirk away from the responsibilities that you have. I don't care what you lead, but get out there and lead. Volunteer, and volunteer for things you believe are important to you. And if you take up a leadership role, that's great. But get out there and make a difference. You've got a lot of life ahead of you. Don't let it pass you by. All right? Thank you all so much.